It is 7:30 and it feels like it has been forever since we've had story time. I guess it was just a long weekend. Oh yeah, I couldn't do Thursday night, so it seemed even extra longer. So, I'm supposed to read another story before I start Seekers to give everybody time to get on here. So I think I will read The Steadfast Tin Soldier, page 185. I don't know that I've read this one actually, so this will be new for me as well. So there he is, The Steadfast Tin Soldier. Oh, I think this one is, I think I have read this one. Once upon a time, there were 25 tin soldiers in a wooden box. Each was brave, each was handsome, and wore a smart blue uniform. One soldier, Will, had only a single leg. He had been made last, and the toy maker had run out of tin. Imagine that. Will stood just as straight on his one leg as the others did on two, and he was just as brave and handsome. The tin soldiers were given to a boy on his birthday. Will looked around and found that he was in a nursery. There were many other toys in the room. On the far side of the table, he saw a castle made of paper. In the doorway of the castle stood a beautiful paper maiden. Will fell in love with her at once. The paper maiden, whose name was Alyssa, was a very graceful dancer. One arm was raised above her head, and one foot was lifted so high behind her that Will thought she had only one leg, just like him. She wore a dress made of sky blue gauze with a blue ribbon on one sleeve. She would make a perfect wife for me, thought Will. He gazed and gazed at the paper maiden, unable to take his eyes off of her. Evening came, and the boy put all the soldiers except Will back in the box. When it grew dark, the toys began to play together. The tin soldier stood stiffly at attention and watched Alyssa. She stood still and looked at him out of the corner of her eye. The next morning, the boy took the soldier and stood him on the windowsill. All of a sudden, a gust of wind blew. Will fell out of the window, and his hat stuck in the dirt between stones in the street below. Soon it began to rain. The rain came down so hard that water ran in torrents down the street. Will bravely waited for the downpour to end. When it was over, two boys found the toy soldier. They made a paper boat, put Will in it, and floated him down a canal. Well, this is sad. The canal emptied into a dark tunnel. The waters were so swift that the paper boat whirled and tipped dangerously, but the tin soldier held fast and was very brave. How he wished that the beautiful Alyssa could be here with him. Then he would have been happy. A big rat who lived in the tunnel suddenly loomed up beside the boat. "Where's your pass?" the rat demanded. "Give me your pass at once." The tin soldier remained still and steady. The rat swam as fast as he could, but the boat whirled away too fast in the current. Hi, Miss Abby. I thought you were going to give up on this deal. Maybe it'll just be you and I tonight, and we can really ask questions and talk about the book. I'm reading The Steadfast Tin Soldier. Soon the rat was left behind. Will could hear the sound of the rat's voice fading as the boat whirled on. He let out a great sigh of relief. Will wondered what was in store for him next and if he would ever see the beautiful Alyssa again. The current grew stronger and stronger, pulling the boat along faster and faster. Just as Will began to see daylight at the end of the tunnel, he heard a terrible splashing. Will's boat was heading straight for a waterfall. He knew the poor soggy boat could never survive a waterfall. But there was no avoiding it. He pulled himself up and stood more bravely than ever on his one leg. We're reading The Steadfast Tin Soldier. It's about a toy soldier, and the toy maker ran out of stuff to make him, and so he only made him with one leg, and he saw this beautiful ballerina, and her leg Her hand was over her head, and her leg was so far back behind her, he thought she only had one leg as well. So he fell madly in love, of course. Unfortunately, two boys put him in a boat and put him in the water, which now he's getting ready to float over a waterfall. Once the soggy paper boat was caught in the rushing waterfall, it quickly filled with water and sank. This must certainly be my end, thought the tin soldier as he plunged swiftly down into the whirlpool. I will never again see the beautiful Alyssa, nor will I ever know how wonderful it would have been to watch her dance for me. Round and round he whirled. His shiny blue uniform caught the eye of a large fish. The fish stopped, looked Will over head to toe, and then swallowed him in one gulp. Hi, Madison. We're just reading our pre-story called The Steadfast Tin Soldier. You might know it as the Nutcracker. It was much darker in the fish than in the tunnel, but Will held himself as straight as he could. The fish seemed to dash around frantically for a time, and then he lay quiet. After a long time, there was a flash like lightning, and Will saw daylight again. The fish had been caught on someone's hook. Now it was in a kitchen, and the cook was preparing it for dinner. My goodness, look at this tin soldier inside my fish, exclaimed the cook. She pulled Will out, then wiped him off and brought him to the nursery. Can you imagine catching a fish and finding a tin soldier in it? Will looked around and saw the box where his brothers were in the paper castle. His heart started to beat faster when he realized that he was home. The boy came into the nursery and looked at the tin soldier. Where have you been? The little boy asked him in an accusing tone. You're damp, and you smell like fish. Suddenly, he opened the window and tossed Will into the flower garden below. Will lay among the petunias and felt sad, but he remained brave. That wasn't very nice. Hi, Haley. Just then, a gentle wind blew over him. It blew through the house, caught up Alyssa, and blew her straight out the open window into the garden. With a graceful little flutter, the paper dancer landed next to Will among the petunias. The two looked at each other with beating hearts and adoring eyes. Then they slid very close together. Will you stay with me and be my wife? Will asked. Yes, forever and ever, she whispered. Oh boy, girls. And that is exactly what Alyssa did. Will and Alyssa were married beneath the leaves of a low-growing plant. Sometimes when the moon shone through the branches above and the air was balmy and warm, the graceful Alyssa would dance for her husband. She always remained true to Will, as did the steadfast tin soldier to her. All right, ladies, there are going to be some upset people that did not join us tonight because I could tell Friday everybody was like hanging on the edge of their seat. Now, here's the problem. Since I read to you at school, I have to figure out where we are to read at home. We talked about Toklo and how his mom chased him off, right? And then we were back to Khalik, who was starving, and she came across the maybe we were at Khalik. I think maybe we were at Khalik, page 130, 153 or 133. My little eyes can't tell me. 133. Anybody remember what we ended up on? Well, I'll start reading Khalik and we'll find out soon enough if we read this part, okay? Hunger gnawed at Khalik's belly and her paws trembled with exhaustion. The long shadows of the night were slipping away across the wet grass as the sun peeked over the edge of the sky above her. There were streaks of clouds like long claw scratches. She reached a scrawny tree, one of the few she could see in either direction, and sat down to rest for a moment. Khalik looked up at the pathway star, shining as brightly as it had all night. She'd been trying to follow it while staying close to the shore, even up on the ridge, or when she had to travel inland to get around boggy swamps. She made sure she could smell the bay not too far away. Girls' night does anyone agree with me? Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. I kind of like it. The small spot of ice gleamed in the sky above her, reminding her of Nisa and Takik. Maybe her brother was looking at the same star right now. She felt the strong pull of the star, almost as if she could smell the place of never-ending ice already. She knew she had to find it because Takik would be there, looking for her. She got up to walk again, drawn by the fading light of the star. Her paws made a squishing sound as she stepped onto an expanse of marshy grasses. Okay, a marsh is kind of like ankle-length muddy water in grass. It stretched far in front of her. She felt mud squelching up between her claws, and she shuddered, wishing all over again that she could be back on the clean ice and snow over the frozen sea. As she slipped and stumbled through the marsh, she stopped to try and eat some of the grass, but it did almost nothing to ease her hunger. She nearly walked straight past the small lump of brown fur, half hidden by the long grasses, but the breeze whisked by at just the right moment, parting the stems so she could spot it. What do you think it is? Kalik pounced, realizing as her claws hit the flesh that it was a rabbit, and it was already dead. She couldn't tell how it had died, but she was too hungry to care. "Thank you, ice spirit," she whispered, ripping off the skin with her claws. "Wherever you are, thank you." She devoured the rabbit in a few bites, feeling strength return to her legs. When she was finished, she padded toward the shore, following the sound of shrieking. Haley, you probably don't appreciate that after writing your information book about rabbits, do you? Or bunnies. There were birds everywhere now. Birds sailing through the air, birds floating in the water, birds darting along the sand, leaving tiny three-clawed tracks behind them. Kalik had never seen so many living things in one place. She knew some of them were ducks and some were plover, I don't know what those are. From her mother's stories, she guessed the long-necked ones were geese. Shortly before sun high, she emerged from the marsh onto pebbly sand. So what do you think sun high is? When sun is highest in the sky? What time do you think that is? Okay. The sea was going out, and she spotted 5 plovers fighting over a small fish. The silver scrap of food was lying on the sand, with birds diving at it and squawking at one another. One of them was standing over it, attacking any others that came near, but another was able to dive in and grab it before a third seized the tail and tried to yank it away. Kalik dropped into a crouch, then lunged forward with a yelp of satisfaction. She pounced on one of the plovers, pinning it to the ground. She couldn't believe it. Live prey, and she caught it herself. Kalik bit down quickly before the bird could flap its way free of her paws. With her claws, she sliced away the feathers and then chewed her way through the meat of the plover, its tiny bones crunching in her teeth. Yum! Isn't that making you guys hungry? So when the sun is highest in the sky, then that's about noon. You know what the crunching bones remind me of? When we tore open that owl. What's that called? Where the owl barfs up the hair and the crushed animal bones and such. That's what that reminded me of. She couldn't believe, okay, we read that part. Even the bright heat of sun high didn't bother her as much when there was food in her stomach. Feeling triumphant, she padded through the sand, watching the masses of birds whirl and flap and dive for fish in the bay. Hints of green were starting to appear on the bushes along the shore, and Kalik could see more trees again, farther inland. She stopped and sniffed the air. The smell was almost overpowering, like all the rain in the world. She started trotting toward it, drinking in the scents it carried of mud, reeds, and tree roots. She threaded her way through some bushes and skidded to a halt. Ahead of her was a tongue of brown water flowing in the bay. Do you really think there's a tongue of brown water? I don't think so. She stared across to the other side. The brown water was half a sky length away. More swimming? The water looked deep with a fast current. She started shivering, remembering her mother crying out and the whales attacking. There had to be a way around it. She turned her back on the bay and trotted along the brown water's pebbly shore. Sounds like it's a creek or maybe a pond, is what I'm guessing. The brown water twisted and turned through scrubby trees and long grasses. Every time she rounded a bend, hoping to reach its end, she saw it stretching away even further. She felt she might travel forever and never get to the end. When her feet started to hurt, she made her decision to try and swim across. Although the brown water was deep, oh, this is a river, because it said a current, a strong current. Current is that water. Thank you, Abby. Owl pellets. Current is that water that, kind of pulls everything downstream. So I bet this is a river. With her feet, okay, so she climbed down in its muddy side and stepped tentatively into the water. Tentatively means carefully and slowly. It was cold and refreshing. In a few more steps, she was up to her nose. "Silaluke, please help me to the other side," she whispered, and fell forward into the current. She pulled with her front paws and let her back legs hang behind, steering her. Kalik swam further into the brown water. It felt wonderful, the cold water tugging her fur and soothing her muscles. Soon she was far from shore. She was wondering if she was over halfway when something bumped against her legs. Oh, what is it? She pushed her head beneath the surface, and although it was too murky to see anything, she could hear strange sounds. The water was making clicking, whistling, and clanging sounds. I have no idea what's happening here. She lifted up her face to see smooth gray bodies swimming all around her. Clicking and whirring. I think, Haley, it is some kind of fish, but it's not the ocean, Madison, because the ocean is clear and blue and green, and this is muddy brown water. Not with waves, but a current. There were so many of them, it was like the pebbles on the bed, although the ocean has currents too, don't get me wrong. It was like the pebbles on the bed of the brown water had come to life. Panic shot through her. She remembered the black fins and sharp teeth of the orca that had taken her mother away. "Save me, spirits of the ice," she thought. Dolphin, Haley, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Get out of my brain! A spout of water shot into the air, dousing her head with salty spray. The next moment, a head popped out of the water, and Kalik saw that the swimmers weren't killer whales at all. These were small gray whales. The one looking at her had a chubby white head and short, flapping fins. It squeaked cheerfully, and another small whale broke off to join it. They both clicked and whistled at Kalik, and she wondered what they were saying. One of them ducked under, came back up, and spat water at Kalik. The other swam around her, flapping its fins and spinning slowly. For such peculiar-looking animals, peculiar-looking means a little strange-looking, they moved with an odd grace in the water. Kalik felt clumsy and awkward beside them. They splashed around her as she swam toward the shore, and a light giddiness welled inside her. She'd been too terrified to notice before, but the icy water was a relief after so much mud and dust and rocky ground under her paws. Kalik rolled in the water, ducking her head under and sending splashes into the air that made the whales whistle. She felt cooler and lighter, the dirt and grime of many days' travel washing out of her fur. The water tasted of ice, freezing and sharp and full of promises. But there was no ice to be seen. The waves stretched on and on all the way to the edge of the sky. I don't know, Madison, maybe they are in the ocean. Now it's talking about waves stretched on and on. I'm confused. Kalik felt sand under her paws, and she dug in, pushing herself out of the water up onto the shore. A loud whistle sounded from a larger whale swimming by, and the two little whales flipped over and dove away, swimming rapidly to catch up to the others. Kalik watched them go with a deep pang of loneliness. They had one another to play with lots of other whales to keep them company. She never got to play anymore, not without Takik, and she had no one to look after her. Kalik was too tired and wet to go any further today. A short way along the shore, she found a hollowed-out rock sticking out of the sand. She crawled underneath it, digging through the sand until she created a space big enough for her to curl up in. From here, she could see and smell the sea. It made her think of the spirits in the ice, and she drifted off to sleep, wondering how long they stayed around when the ice melted. Was her mother's spirit out in the water somewhere, or had she already splashed up into the sky to become a star looking down on Kalik? The shore of the bay started to change the next day as Kalik kept walking. There were more stones under paw here, the sand giving way to pebbles and larger round rocks. Soon after the sun came up, she saw a large cliff cutting across the beach far ahead of her, blocking her view of the shore beyond. As she got closer to the rocky wall, a dank, heavy smell hit her nose almost at the same time as she heard grumbling and snorting up ahead. She slowed down, wondering what it was and whether it was safe to go any closer. It sounded a bit like thunder or many bears bellowing in pain. So these bears don't go very long without falling into another problem, do they? Hi, Blanky Blank. Who are you? Tell us. Kalik crept up to the edge of the cliff that cut in close to the sea. She peered around it to the strip of land beyond, where the shore curved into a miniature bay enclosed by rocks. All along the sandy beach, huge fat animals were lying on their stomachs. Walruses. So many and so packed together that Kalik couldn't see the ground underneath them. They were the ugliest creatures Kalik had ever seen. 2 long yellow teeth jutted straight down from their top lips. Tiny eyes peered out of the folds around their faces, and their muscles were squashed and bushy. Kalik padded out from behind the wall and trotted along the curve of the small bay. As she got closer, a few of the walruses swung their heads around to look at her. Suddenly, the closest one charged at her, barking, its brown flesh wobbling. That's what they call the way walruses communicate. They call it barking. Its teeth sliced through the air, only whiskers away from Kalik's nose. With a yelp of fear, Kalik fled back the way she came, terror giving extra speed to her paws. She skidded around the end of the rocky cliff and raced inland. She would go as far as she could while keeping the smell of the sea in her nose. She trotted faster, fear spurring her paws along. Visions flashed through her mind of those long, sharp tusks stabbing into her fur. Had her brother run into walruses on his journey? She looked up at the sky, knowing the pathway. Star was out there, even if she couldn't see it in the daylight. Please, spirits of the ice, if you can hear me, she whispered, please protect Keith. Help him to follow the pathway, Star. Tell him I'm coming for him. Tell him to stay alive until I find him. Please. Blanky Blank, who are you? We need to know who you are. All right, girls, do you want me to read one more chapter? It's about Lusa in the Bear Bowl. While we wait for Blanky Blank to tell us who they are. Yes. So we have one. Yes. So I have one person at least that will be with me on the next chapter. And Madison says yes. And Blanky Blank says, I think Blanky Blank left is what I think. All right, girls. Lusa in the Bear Bowl. Lusa's nose twitched. There was something new in the air, something that made her paws itch and her fur prickle. She could smell things growing and changing around her. Although the bear bowl still looked the same, every day more and more birds flew overhead. Sometimes she would sit and watch them and wish she could go wherever they were going. It's the seasons changing, little blackberry, Stella explained. Cold earth is ending, and this is your first leaf time. This is the time when we would be searching for new kinds of food in the wild. But we don't have to do that here because we haven't gone short of food during cold earth. We're safe, and nothing's going to change. You'll get used to it. Now go and play with Yogi. He's probably feeling just as restless as you are. Lusa didn't think so. Yogi couldn't even be bothered to climb to the top of the bear tree to see what was outside the bowl, but she didn't want to be lonely as well as bored, so she went to find him. They were playing on the mountains, jumping off and scampering around to climb back on again, when Lusa heard a whirring noise and doors rattling on the far side of the fence in the grizzly enclosure. She leaped off the rocks and galloped over to the fence, pressing her nose against the cold web. Lusa, Yogi cried, where are you going? What about our game? Yogi, come see, Lusa called. Grumps is getting a friend. The burning smell of the fire beast filled her nose as it prowled into the center of the brown bear enclosure. It was pulling a cage, like the one Aisha had been taken away in. Inside, Lusa could see a large pile of shaggy brown fur. What's like the Maze Runner? Like being in the bear bowl? Like the Maze Runner? I can kind of see that. She had never seen a new bear arrive in the bowl before. She stood up on her hind legs and hooked her front claws in the fence, stretching to get a better view. Two of the feeders came around to the back of the trailer wearing extra pelts on their paws and faces. They unhooked the mesh door and reached in to pull out the shiny skin the new bear was resting on. They dragged it and the bear onto the ground, then slid the skin out from under her. The new grizzly was sound asleep, her back rising and falling in an even rhythm. She was very thin, with patchy fur and scratches all along her muzzle. Lusa wondered what had happened to make her look so battered. Had she been in a fight? If so, she'd lost by the looks of it. Grumps ambled over from his corner. He sniffed the newcomer with a grim look on his face and then lumbered back to his corner where he sat down with his back to her, grumbling. I don't think Grumps wants to share, Lusa said to Yogi. Where do you think this bear came from? It's all thin and patchy. What do you think? I don't think Grumps... Oh, maybe he's worried she'll want to eat all of his food, Yogi said. She's so thin, she must be starving. Where do you think she comes from? Lusa wondered. Do you think she's a wild bear? Did she come from the forest and the mountain? Has she been out there for her whole life? Do you think she's met tigers and elephants and flamingos? How should I know? Yogi said. She's just a brown bear. It's not that interesting. He turned and wandered over to the food bowl, searching for leftovers. Lusa ran to the bear tree and clambered up. She pulled herself onto a long branch that stretched out close to the fence, from where she had a clear view into the brown bear enclosure. The she-bear kept sleeping. She seemed to sleep for a very long time. Lusa lay down on the branch and waited, watching her. She had so many questions, especially if this was a wild bear, a real wild bear. Ooh, the walruses barked like a dog. That's true. So that's a simile, right? I think the reason she's sleeping so much is I bet they had to shoot her with a tranquilizer gun to knock her out, to get her in a truck and get her into the bear bowl. Ages later, the bear stirred. Lusa sat up on her branch. Was she awake? The grizzly rolled onto her side and twitched her paws. It looked like her eyes were still closed, but her mouth was moving as if she was talking to herself. Lusa scrambled down from the tree and ran back to the fence. She strained her ears, keeping very still so she could hear. It sounded like the grizzly was murmuring the word Toby. Over and over again. Who is this bear? Who is this brown bear that came to the bear bowl? Murmuring Toby. Sometimes her voice was soft and sometimes fierce. Then the grizzly grunted in an unhappy way and whispered, Toklo. Lucy didn't understand either of these words. Was the grizzly speaking another language? Not bear language. It didn't sound like the flat-faced language either. Then she caught the word mountain. Then the she-bear's paws jerked and batted at the air as if she was dreaming about running. I'd be bored if I had to have no one to play with me. Boredom. Totally agree. However, I feel like all of us on here tonight are creative enough that we could come up with something even if we thought we were bored. Okay. So, Abby, you think Lusa's mother died? She didn't. She came back. They took her someplace and she got well. Well? Okay. River, she whispered, to the river. Careful, Toby. Her murmurs trailed away and her paws went limp again. She'd fallen back into a deeper sleep. Lusa was confused but also excited. If the bear was talking about mountains and rivers, well, surely that meant she'd come from the wild. Maybe when she woke up, Lusa would be able to find out more. Most of the day passed before the strange bear awoke. Lusa had given up watching her and was practicing climbing the tree again, digging her claws into the bark and experimenting to see if she could climb down head first, which didn't seem to work very well. Yogi was perched on a boulder, calling out unhelpful suggestions. Let go and jump, he shouted. Maybe you'll find out you can fly. Lusa ignored him. He wasn't as interested in climbing as she was, which meant she was already much better at it, even though he was moons older than her. Suddenly, an angry roar split the air. Startled, Lusa nearly lost her grip on the branch, but she dug her claws in before she could tumble out of the tree. She clung to the tree, panting. She'd never heard a roar with so much fury and outrage and pain in it before. King's roars were stern and commanding. Grumps sometimes roared in a grouchy, irritated way, but this roar was way different. It had to be the new she-bear. That reminds me, glad that you are a teacher this year. Glad that I'm your teacher this year. I'm glad you're my student this year, Abby. But what reminds you of some people in our class, names you wouldn't mention? Wanting to play or being creative? I don't know which one. Okay. Let's see. Oh, she was yawning. And okay. Lusa crept along the branch and peered down into the brown bear enclosure. The new grizzly was running around and around the bowl, charging at the fences. She reared up on her hind legs and scraped her front claws against the back wall, roaring furiously. Grumps looked bewildered. Bewildered means like totally confused. He was up on his hind paws, looking from the she-bear to the wall where several flat faces were watching. Yogi came running over and scrambled up the tree beside Lusa. His eyes were ginormous, and he was shaking like the trees in a storm. That bear is crazy. I think she's sad, Lusa said. The she-bear had sounded sad when she'd been whispering those odd words. Maybe she's lonely. Lonely? She's got a brain full of bees. She needs a friend, Lusa decided. She doesn't want to make friends. How do you know? Lusa challenged. Maybe I'll be her friend. Ha! Yogi flicked his ears. She won't talk to you. You'll just make her madder if you try. We'll see, Lusa said, lying down on the branch to watch the raging grizzly. How do they bark? How much capacity? Well, we'd have to cut part of the walrus off to fill it to capacity, Abby, and I just don't think that's right. Finally, the she-bear wore herself out. She stopped running and collapsed near the fence, breathing heavily with exhaustion. Here I go, Lusa said, sitting up. You're going to get your nose clawed off, Yogi growled. Lusa climbed down the tree and padded over to the fence near the new bear. She crept up carefully, trying not to make any sudden noises. The grizzly swung her head around and saw the black bear cub approaching. She lowered her head and barked, but Lusa couldn't tell if it was an unfriendly noise or not. Hello, Lusa said, scratching the dirt nervously with her paws. I'm Lusa. What's your name? The grizzly sighed and closed her eyes. Lusa waited for a moment, and then, disappointed, she turned to go back to the tree. It's Oka, the brown bear growled. Lusa jumped. At least the bear wasn't speaking that strange language anymore. Lusa pressed closer to the fence. Welcome to the bear bowl, Oka, she said, feeling bolder. She lifted herself onto her hind legs and sniffed the air, trying to figure out what she could smell in Oka's scent. Where did you come from? Were you in the wild? Did you live on the mountain? Have you seen a forest? but Oka turned her massive head away and buried it between her paws. I told you she wouldn't want to make friends, Yogi called from the tree. Maybe later, Lucy said to Oka, backing away. Whenever you're feeling better. I'll be right here. Of course, she had nowhere else to go. Oka slept for the rest of the day, staying outside when night fell instead of going into the grizzly caves with Grumps. Lucy came out the next morning to find Oka stomping around on the other side of the fence, growling and muttering. Sometimes she would attack the tree that grew at the back of the grizzly enclosure, shredding its bark and snapping savagely at its branches. Do you guys see that lightning? And can you hear that thunder? Is it raining there? Whoa, hey, Christian. Christian, we've been an all-girls group tonight, so you're going to have to be okay with that. This worried Lucy a lot because if there were bear spirits living in that tree, they wouldn't be very pleased. She hoped they were all right. She stayed away from the fence, playing with Yogi and rolling around to make the flat faces laugh. It was the first really hot day of leaf time, and lots of flat-faced cubs were visiting, chattering, and pointing at her. Lucy was able to get 3 different feeders to throw her extra fruit, which made her feel very clever. It's going to rain tonight, Stella announced as they ate their evening meal. That's weird. I was just saying it's raining here, and now it's going to rain there, too. Will you read the bedtime stories? Stella from the one and only Ivan. Ooh. Okay. It's storming outside in Richmond as well. If you were born, you could fly like that, but you're not. I really don't think I would want to fly. Just to be honest, I'm a little afraid of heights, and that freaks me out a bit. Okay? Abby, Yogi is the other bear that plays with Lucy in the bear bowl. He's a cub as well, but he's older than her. It's going to rain tonight, Stella announced as they ate their evening meal. I can feel the air getting thicker and wetter. Lucy sniffed. She could see what Stella meant. Clouds were rolling in the sky, seemed all crackly around the edges. Oka will sleep in the caves if it's raining, won't she? Lucy said. Who's Oka? Stella asked. The new grizzly, Lucy said, pointing toward the fence with her muzzle. She slept outside last night, but if there's a storm, you shouldn't be worrying yourself about grizzlies, little blackberry, Stella interrupted. It's not your problem if she sleeps outside in the rain. But Lucy was worried about Oka. A heavy rain started shortly after dark, and as Lucy crept back under the shelter, she could see Oka's blurry, hulking shape crouched in the corner near the fence, away from the trees or anything that could shield her from the storm. The rain pounded on the roof all night as Lucy dreamed about the sad, lonely bear outside. She woke up near dawn when the rain finally stopped. Yogi was sprawled across the den with one of his paws flopped over her head. Lucy climbed free carefully so she wouldn't wake him and went outside. Birds were twittering in the trees, and the air had a fresh, newly washed feeling to it, like the best fruit the feeders brought before Yogi trampled on it. There were still piles of gray clouds in the sky, but light pink rays of sunlight were starting to peek through as the sun came up. Oka was lying in the corner where she'd first met Lucy. Her wet fur was steaming in the cool early morning air. So I don't think she went inside. I think she slept out in the rain all night. Are they big? Are they small? I have so many questions. I know, Abby, I love the way you ask questions about your reading. Hesitantly, Lucy approached, but although Oka was watching her, the grizzly made no move to run away. Lucy sat down by the fence and tilted her head, studying the brown bear. Did you stay out here all night in the rain? She asked. Don't you mind getting wet? Oka closed her eyes and didn't respond. Maybe you're used to it, Lucy guessed. You must get rained on all the time in the wild, right? Oka still didn't answer. I wish I could go into the wild, Lucy went on. I'd like to see a forest and catch my own prey. Oka snorted, making Lucy jump. There is no prey, the brown bear snarled. Her eyes were open now, black and fierce. There's nothing to eat. But you must have eaten something. I thought the wild was full of food. It used to be, Oka growled. Fishing, finding fish in the rivers was what we used to do back then. What's a river? Lucy asked. It's a long tongue of water that rolls through the hills and mountains and forests carrying fish. I don't think I've ever eaten a fish, Lucy admitted, but I know they bring them for Grumps sometimes. And the white bears eat them too. So I know what they smell like. She wrinkled her nose. Fish is a brown bear's favorite food, Oka said. She still had her eyes half closed. Toklo would have liked fish. He would have been good at catching fish. Maybe he is now, but I'll never know. She stopped abruptly. Who's Toklo? Lusa prompted. Toby, Oka murmured, curling onto her side and resting her muzzle on the ground. Why did you leave us? I'm sorry I couldn't feed you enough, but didn't I try? Couldn't you have held on? Who are Toby and Toklo? Lusa begged, pulling herself up on her hind legs by hooking her claws in the fence. Oka, please tell me who they are. You don't know what I've had to do, Toby, Oka whispered without looking up. What I had to do to poor Toklo, what I was forced to do just to stay alive, scavenging from flat-faced dens, eating scraps of metal containers, running for my life from the fire beasts. A violent shudder racked her body. Toklo, I'm so sorry, Toklo. She closed her eyes. Lusa stared at Oka in dismay. She hadn't meant to upset her. Quietly, she dropped to all fours and backed away. Whatever had happened before Oka came to the bear bowl, it must have truly been terrible. Resting on skin, was it a blanket and then the bears called it skin? Probably. Was it looser black bear because it's a grizzly bear? It's like Toklo, orthopedic, which one died, and I was super sad. Toby died. And tonight I'm ready. Moldy locks and the three beards. I can't. That's funny. I haven't heard that one. I think it's a wild bear because don't normal bears come from the wild? Yes. Is that noise Dublin? I think it's thunder. Okay. And the bear is Oka. They caught Oka and brought her into the bear bowl. So I'm going to bring Dublin over to say goodnight to you because you asked to see him. You're going to read Goldie Bear. What was it? I lost it. Moldy Locks and the Three Beards. And what does Pomerang mean? Pomerang. I don't know. Was that something I read in the book or something I just said? Debbie, come here. Oh, you're right there. I didn't even know it. He was sitting right next to me. Devlin, come on. Put your legs up here. Put your paws up and say goodnight. Come on, big boy. Put your paws up here. Come on. Come on. There's one. Come on. Come on. Jump up here. Oh, well, you silly pup dog. And he just knocked a bunch of stuff over. Debbie. What happened here? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Why is this not? I don't know what's happening. It's not working. I don't know why. Has the camera been on tonight, you guys? I'm not sure I had it on. Well, let me see. Can you say hi, Debbie? Say hi, big boy. Who's your big boy? Who's your big boy? Get your toy. All right. Good night, my friends. I will see you tomorrow.